I'm not sure these numbers add up.
Let me take another look, Mom.
We need to be absolutely certain before proceeding.
The check for $33 million lay on the kitchen table between us, a flimsy piece of paper that felt like a tectonic plate shifting the very foundation of our world. The air, once fragrant with the scent of my homemade bread, was now thick with the metallic smell of betrayal. My daughter, Chloe, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, the young woman I'd worked 3 jobs to put through law school, wouldn't meet my eyes. Her lawyer, a man with a suit that cost more than my car, did the talking. As you can see, Mrs. Evans, the will of your late husband's uncle was specific, he said, his voice slick and condescending. The entirety of the inheritance, all $33 million, goes to his blood niece, Chloe. You are, unfortunately, not mentioned. I stared at Chloe, my heart hammering against my ribs. Chloe, what is this? This has to be a mistake. We talked about this. We were going to pay off the house, secure our future together. She finally looked up, and the coldness in her eyes stole the breath from my lungs. It wasn't my daughter looking back at me. It was a stranger. Mother, be reasonable, she said, her tone flat, rehearsed. This is a life-changing amount of money. My money. I need to manage it responsibly, without emotional interference. This house, your lifestyle, it's a drain. It's holding me back. Holding you back? The words were a whisper, torn from a place of deep, searing pain. I sold my jewelry to buy your textbooks. I skipped meals so you could have new clothes for your internships. This lifestyle is the roof I kept over your head. She sighed, as if my history of sacrifice was a tedious anecdote. That was your job as a parent. This is different. I need you to leave. Leave. I choked out. Leave my own home. It's not your home. The lawyer interjected smoothly, sliding a document toward me. The deed was never formally transferred after your husband's passing. It was part of the uncle's estate. It now belongs to Miss Evans. She is offering you a 30-day notice to vacate. Out of courtesy, Chloe stood up, smoothing her designer skirt. She picked up the check, folding it neatly, and placing it in her purse. The finality of the gesture was a physical blow. I'll have movers come for my things next week, she said, walking to the door. Please be gone by then. Don't make this ugly. The door clicked shut behind her. The sound echoed in the silent, suddenly hostile house. I was alone, the mother who had given everything, left with nothing but the echoing silence of a love annihilated by greed. The cold weight of injustice settled in my bones, and in its shadow, a new, darker emotion began to take root. It was sharp, focused, and burning with a cold, relentless fire. Revenge. The 30 days passed in a blur of cold fury and meticulous planning. I did not pack my memories. I packed ammunition. I took the small severance from the job I just lost, the one I'd kept to help with our bills, and I rented a cramped, dusty room above a garage in a part of town Chloe would never deign to visit. The space smelled of motor oil and despair, a perfect cocoon for my transformation. My love for Chloe had been my core, my purpose. Now, excised without anesthetic, that hollow, doubt cavity filled with a new purpose, ruin, I would not scream, I would not plead. I would become an anvil, waiting patiently for the hammer to fall, and I would ensure Chloe was the one swinging it right onto her own life. I knew my daughter. The money wasn't a blessing for her. It was a test she was destined to fail. She was brilliant but arrogant, savvy but emotionally reckless. She saw people as tools and obstacles. With unlimited funds, that arrogance would become her Achilles' heel. I began my work in the shadows. I used library computers, burner phones, the skills of a lifetime of resourcefulness. I found her new social media, a curated gallery of obscene wealth, private jets, champagne towers, a monstrously sleek modern mansion she'd purchased for cash. Each post was a knife twist, but I welcomed the pain. It fed the fire. Then I found my first thread. A tagged photo from a lavish party. Among the sycophants and socialites was a man I recognized, Julian Croft, a hedge fund manager with a reputation as slick as his hair and a history of SEC investigations that had never quite stuck. Chloe's caption gushed about his visionary investment strategies. A predator had found my lamb, and she was welcoming him into the pen. I couldn't warn her. She wouldn't listen. Instead, I decided to give Julian a push. An anonymous email from a seemingly concerned party found its way to a financial blogger known for digging into white-collar crime. It contained no accusations, just pointed questions about Julian's newest, surprisingly wealthy investor, Chloe Evans, and the puzzling performance of the fund he'd just convinced her to pour $10 million into. The seed was planted. Next, her social circle. I remembered a girl from college, Sasha, Chloe's one true friend before the money. I'd always liked her. A scroll through Sasha's profile showed a genuine life, hiking trips, coffee with friends, a modest apartment. Chloe's profile showed her at the same trendy club, 3 nights in a row, with a new clique of vapid heiresses. Sasha was nowhere to be seen. Another anonymous message, this time to Sasha's brother, whom I'd met years ago. You might want to check on your sister. Her best friend seems to have forgotten she exists since cashing a massive check. It's looking pretty lonely over here. It was a small thing, but friendships are pillars. I was quietly loosening the bolts on all of hers. My days were spent in my dusty room, surrounded by printouts and note cards, a general mapping the destruction of her empire. I ate cheap noodles and drank bitter coffee, my body withering while my mind grew sharper, colder. I was a ghost in the machine of her life, a whisper of consequence on the wind she thought she commanded. I saw a news segment about a charity gala she was headlining. She was on stage, dazzling in a gown that cost more than my life savings, talking about giving back, with a condescending smile that didn't reach her eyes. The anchor gushed about her philanthropy. I saw the truth. It was a performance, a tax write-off, a way to buy admiration. The little girl who'd cried when a bird flew into our window was gone, replaced by this hollow, gilded statue. A part of me, the mother, wept for that loss, but the larger part, the betrayed, the humiliated, stoked the flames higher. This was no longer just about the money or the house. This was about the soul of the child I'd raised. If I couldn't save it, I would expose it for the rotten thing it had become. 3 days after her very public, triumphant gala, my burner phone vibrated on the wobbly table. An unknown number, but one I recognized from her new mansion's public listing. I let it ring 3 times, savoring the moment. I pictured her in her cavernous, sterile home, surrounded by expensive nothing, finally feeling the first chill of the ice she'd built her life upon. I answered, silence for a beat, then a hitched, ragged breath. Mom. Her voice was cracked, small. It was the voice of the little girl who had nightmares. It was the sound of my revenge arriving right on schedule. The sound of her voice, so fragile and broken, was a symphony. For 3 days, I had been the silent architect of her collapse. Now, I would be the witness. Mom, please, I need your help. The words were slurred, choked with tears that felt deliciously real. I let the silence stretch, a vast, judgmental void. I'm sorry, I said, my voice perfectly neutral, devoid of the triumph roaring inside me. You must have the wrong number. My daughter threw me out of my home. I know I did. She wailed, the facade of the sophisticated heiress shattering completely. It was a mistake, a huge, horrible mistake. Mom, it's all gone wrong. I listened, saying nothing, as the story of her implosion poured out. Julian Croft had indeed been a fraud. The financial blogger's piece had sparked a chain reaction. The SEC had frozen his assets, and with them, her $10 million. The bank, nervous about the scandal, was calling in the line of credit she'd taken out against the mansion for more investments. The new friends. They'd vanished the moment the bad press hit. scattering like cockroaches when the light turns on. The charity gala was now a subject of mockery, headlines painting her as a gullible fool who'd bought her way into high society only to be conned out of her shoes. She was financially exposed, socially obliterated, and utterly alone in a multi-million-dollar monument to her own avarice. "They're going to take everything, Mom. The house, the cars, everything. And the lawyers, they say I might be liable, that I knew about Julian's schemes. I didn't. I swear I didn't." She was hysterical now. "You have to help me. You always know what to do. Please." I closed my eyes. This was the moment. I had her exactly where I wanted her, destitute, humiliated, and begging at the feet of the woman she'd discarded. The path to absolute destruction lay clear before me. I could say no. I could hang up and let the system she'd so admired devour her whole. It would be the perfect, poetic justice. But then she spoke again, her voice dropping to a broken whisper. "I'm so alone, Mom. The house is so quiet. I keep thinking about your bread baking in the kitchen. I keep thinking. I threw away the only real thing I ever had." The image flashed in my mind. Flour on her small nose, her laughter as she kneaded dough too hard, the warm, safe smell of our home. Not this cold mansion, but our home, the home she'd taken from me. The anger flared, white, hot. She didn't get to use those memories now. "They were mine. They were my weapons. Help you," I finally said, my voice low and steady, each word a shard of ice. "You want my help, Chloe. Here it is. You are reaping the exact harvest you sowed. You valued money over loyalty, status over love, sharks over family. You got exactly what you wanted, a life exactly as deep as your bank account. Now you get to lie in it." I heard her sharp intake of breath, a sob caught in her throat. I continued, the architect finally revealing her blueprint. "That anonymous tip about Julian, that was me. The note to Sasha's brother about you abandoning her, me. I have watched every single step of your glorious downfall from a rented room above a garage. I have celebrated every loss. The silence on the other end was absolute. I had just handed her the knife and shown her where to plunge it into her own heart. You did this." The words were barely audible, hollow with a horror far greater than financial ruin. "I gave you exactly the world you asked for, Chloe, one without me in it. You thought 3 million made you powerful. You were wrong. It just made you a target, and your mother, the one you thought was so weak and poor, was the one who pulled the trigger. Enjoy your victory." I moved my thumb to end the call. This was it, the culmination of my revenge, the ultimate lesson. She was broken in the dark, and I had been the one to turn out the lights. But just before I pressed the button, I heard it, not a sob, not a plea, a whisper, so soft I almost missed it. "I'm sorry." 2 words, unadorned, undefended, not a tactic to manipulate, but a raw, honest emission of a soul finally recognizing its own failings. They hung in the static between us, fragile and utterly disarming. My thumb froze. The cold fire of my vengeance flickered. I had wanted her to feel pain, to feel regret. I had never expected her to feel truth. The image of the anvil returned. I was the anvil. She was the hammer. I had positioned myself perfectly for the blow. But in shattering herself against me, what was left of me would be left standing. A cold, hard piece of metal, in a dark, dusty room, surrounded by the debris of my own child. The revenge was perfect. It was complete, and it was utterly, devastatingly empty. I took a deep breath, the first real one in 3 months. The taste of dust and bitterness filled my lungs. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice rough, stripped of its icy venom. A confused, hitched breath. I'm at the house, the big one, or our home." I asked, the distinction, everything. She understood. The big one. "Pack 1 bag," I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "Just 1, with things that matter, not what it cost, what it means. I'll be there in an hour." I hung up before she could reply. I looked around my tiny room at the maps of her destruction pinned to the walls. I slowly took them down one by one, tearing each page into neat, small pieces. The war was over, I had won, and in winning, I had finally understood that some victories are prisons. I drove to her mansion not as an avenging angel, but as a mother. She was waiting on the colossal steps, a single suitcase beside her, her face puffy and bare of makeup. She looked 20 years old again, terrified. She didn't speak as I approached. She just looked at me, her eyes holding a universe of shame. "Get in the car," I said, not unkindly. As we drove away from the gilded cage, the early morning sun began to rise. We didn't go to my rented room. We drove to a small diner, the kind we used to go to after her soccer games. We sat in a booth, and I ordered 2 coffees and a plate of toast. We didn't talk about the money, or Julian, or the mansion. We sat in a silence that was no longer hostile, but heavy with the rubble of what had been, and the terrifying possibility of what might be built anew. The revenge was sweet, but it was a poison. Letting it go was bitter, but it was the antidote. I had chosen the antidote. Not for her, for me, because carrying the burden of hatred was a life sentence I was no longer willing to serve. The cost of revenge was the soul of the person who carried it out, and I decided that my soul, though battered, was worth more than $33 million. Moral of the story: revenge is a fire that burns the hand of the one who holds it tighter than it burns the one it's thrown upon.